Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. If anxiety is a problem for you, take a moment to think about when it all began. I can look back now and recognise my first symptoms of anxiety at 4 years old. I had an upset tummy, and I would tell my mum I didn't want to go to school because school was really the source of the upset tummy to begin with. Incidentally, I did go to school every day, despite the fact that I didn't feel well. Mum would send me, and I'm grateful she did. It's important to remember that while everyone experiences anxiety, remember it's an emotion. Not everyone has an anxiety disorder, but for those that do, much more often than not, it began in childhood. Today's guest has made doing something about that her life's work. Leslie Cohen-Rubury is a highly experienced licensed clinical social worker. Among her many specialties, she has a particular passion for supporting parents of anxious children. She's a mum of 3, grandmother of 2, and has been married for over 40 years. She is joining us today from her vacation, which is so generous. And I also want to let you know that she is the host of a fly-on-the-wall therapy podcast called Is My Child a Monster? And it is great listening. It's fascinating, even if you don't have children. So, Leslie, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your holidays to join us.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you, Jodi, and on your podcast, which I'm just loving as well.
Oh, thank you. When we were talking off air, Leslie and I were just talking about how we both feel about podcasting and how we feel so moved to share what we know with our audiences. And so it's very special to be on the other side of the microphone sometimes as a podcaster, isn't it? Because you can just sort of bring together all your experience, well, not all of it, of course, over 35 years in a 45-minute podcast. Okay, that would be something. So, Leslie, one of your real passions, obviously, is about parenting anxious kids and particularly setting anxious kids up for long-term success. One of the things that, as parents, we know from the research, and I recall this research coming to light more publicly during COVID, was that parents don't always know what to look for. There's so much that can be done for anxiety that's problematic, but you have to know that that's an issue to start with, don't you? So it shows in so many different ways. Can you start by sharing some insights around what to look for parents?
Sure, I'd love to, because from my own personal experience, I had 3 children, all very different, and it was not obvious in any of my children. So just to use that as an example, as I said, I have 3 children, and one daughter at the age of 3 became very oppositional. Anytime I asked her to do something, put on her shoes, get ready to go out, I got this very strong reaction, often tantrums, which just looked like she was oppositional. As a matter of fact, at that point, if I had taken her maybe to a psychologist, I might have gotten the diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder. There was a lot of tantruming going on. And mind you, with my master's in special ed and my master's in social work, I was a very confident parent, and just my excitement about being a parent. And it still didn't make sense to me what was going on. And it was only the framework that I used, which I share with parents, which is going below the surface, to say, yes, there was this oppositional behavior, but I took a step back and I said, what's causing it? And what was causing it was her anxiety. That wearing 2 shoes that felt different was very difficult for her. That might have just been her sensitivity. Going to a friend's house and not knowing what it was going to happen at the friend's house, there was anxiety. And so in the car, I would get all this resistance and complaining and resistance for, I don't want to go, why are we going? This is stupid. But the truth is, that was her anxiety. So that's one presentation. You can have the no, I won't do it. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to. You knock your head against the wall because you're saying, wait a minute, it's what you want to do. You want to go to your friend's house to that birthday party. You want to go to that whatever event it is. And yet they couldn't do it and they'd say, no, no, no. So that's one presentation. In children, you mentioned for yourself the somatic complaints, the headache, the stomach ache. Those are very real. Parents are often, I've taken my child to the doctor, and there's this body-mind connection. So yes, the doctor may say there is nothing physically wrong with your child, but we want to be careful because the emotions are affecting your child's physical well-being. So keeping that in mind is another presentation that we have somatic complaints. Another presentation, similar, is the internalizer, the child that sort of keeps it in, which it could come out in somatic complaints. But my son, easygoing son, he was people pleaser. He did anything I asked him to do, but he was constantly chewing his shirt. His shirts every shirt he had these big chew marks on it because he was chewing his shirts. Or the child that's licking their lips out of anxiety. So there are many presentations. There's the ruminating. Children who keep asking you the same question over and over and over again. Why are we doing this? Why are we going there? When are we doing this? What time are we doing this? What will happen? Will it be rainy? Will it be sunny? How much rain will there be? And we used to give my daughter a paper and pencil when we were watching a movie. And I'd say, Dale, you have a lot of great questions. Write them down as we watch the movie. I'm happy to pause the movie after 15 minutes or after a half hour and see if the question's been answered. So we do want to understand that the child that had a lot of ruminating thoughts is another way of seeing a child with anxiety. And it goes on. We have OCD presentations, obsessive compulsive disorder, where children at a young age might start having some of these compulsions to touch something over and over again, to make sure they have their shoelaces tied exactly the same. It's common in childhood, but it can be the beginning and an indication of anxiety as well.
Listening to you might be causing anxiety in some listeners who are thinking, oh my goodness, yes, this is a presentation I'm seeing. And the idea of if your child might be operating in ways that are indicative of ritualistic behavior, that, I have to do this in a certain order, I can't do that before I do this, and also the reassurance seeking and all of the things you've spoken about, that creates anxiety, because the idea that our child might have something wrong when it comes to their mental health is so frightening. And I'd love you to talk about normal anxiety versus disordered anxiety.
Right.
Before we start to look at how we can support parents to understand that there's so much that can be done. I want to reassure parents listening, if you are feeling concerned, that there's so much that can be done, and it's a gift to know. It's a gift to know for the child and for the family. But let's start by talking about, anxiety is a problem for so many people. We know that it's a huge issue for children and adolescents. And we know that most mental illness presents firstly in childhood, but not all anxiety is a disorder. Can you speak to that?
Well, it's biological. Anxiety is a biological feature, just like I have brown, curly hair, whatever. We want to remember that anxiety is a part of us, and it's there, and it's hardwired, and it communicates important information to us. So we don't want to look at anxiety or any of our uncomfortable emotions as good or bad. Right? So happiness feels like a good emotion and anxiety feels like a bad emotion. Well, the truth is that anxiety might help me remember my passport if I'm going away, or might help me prepare for the test that I need to study for. So anxiety runs a continuum of good, healthy emotion that allows us to prepare and motivates us to be organized and prepared for life. So anxiety is not a bad emotion. What happens is anxiety, when we, one, either don't understand it, or two, experience it at very high levels, does become problematic. It becomes very uncomfortable. And sometimes right now, we are actually living in a society where there's a lot of focus on happiness and making sure everyone's happy. And we forget the value of distress, and we forget the value of struggle. So if our children are being raised in a child-centered world where everything's supposed to go well for them, they're not getting practice at those uncomfortable emotions of disappointment and anxiety and things like that. So believe that yes, there is a higher level of anxiety right now because kids haven't practiced dealing with distress, the distress of being uncomfortable. When children come home and something went wrong, parents immediately want to fix it. Do we need to go to the school? Do we need to find out what happened and what went wrong and how do we fix it? Rather than saying when they come home, wow, that sounds really uncomfortable. How did you handle that? That's amazing. You're here to tell me about your discomfort. And so we can start to look at the anxiety as something that's not so problematic. Of course, you pointed out that on the continuum, there is anxiety that is too intense and too much, and our children don't have the skills to handle it. One of the things that I point out in my parenting podcast is really about taking a long-term view of dealing with anxiety because it's going to take time for your child to develop the skills to handle problematic anxiety. So parents need to have a lot of faith. They need to be able to tolerate their own discomfort when they see their child uncomfortable. So kids are anxious about being anxious. Parents are anxious about their child's anxiety. We want to lower some of the level of fear around anxiety and normalize it a little bit more.
We are singing from the same hymn book, as they say.
I noticed that when I listen to your podcast. Absolutely.
It's really reassuring and comforting because, and I say reassuring, and I was a child that just sought constant reassurance from my mum. And yeah, that's an avoidance strategy for kids. They can't tolerate the discomfort. I need someone to tell me it's going to be okay. Yes, I put my hand up. That was me for at least 2 decades. Even when I was working my anxiety wasn't diagnosed for over 20 years.
Yes.
And so I didn't know I had an issue. I was just kind of coping the best way I knew how. And parenting, our insights into parenting now are golden and so far beyond what my parents and what your parents would have had. They were just doing the best they could with what they had, which is all we do as parents. We've just got so much more insight now, especially being able to be a fly on the wall, listening to you, speaking to parents who are presenting with challenges in their family with one of their children. So thank you again for the work you do. When it comes to expectations, you talk about managing expectations for parents and for children, and that children might be resistant because there's so much parents can do when it comes to anxiety. And in fact, parents are more influential than anyone else in their child's anxiety. So talk to us about managing expectations and patience.
Well, parents are in a really, really special position because children often go to school. Not all children can manage this, but they go to school and they present as if they don't have the same anxiety. They may be rule followers, so they are, they're in their classroom trying to follow the rules, and teachers are often very surprised when I say we're dealing with a very anxious child. So when you said parents are the ones dealing with it, yes, they go home and parents are like, why is my child the monster at home when they're not at school? So much fun. I ran a parenting group for 22 years at our local elementary school. And yeah, it was such a sweet little thing. Those parents would come back and I prepared them and they would practice using the skills that I sent them home to practice. And when you try to bring these skills to your child, first of all, when they're upset and they're in emotion mind, they're not thinking about the fact that they need help. They're just feeling the emotion. So the timing of when we give our kids the skills is very important as one expectation. But I really want parents to expect their child to say, that's stupid, it doesn't work. And I feel badly because parents need that immediate gratification that they know what they're doing is working. But I'm sorry, I don't have the good news that you are going to get that immediate gratification. However, I heard it myself, and I've heard it from many, many, many parents that I've worked with after a long time. They do say that it clicks for children. And so I think of it like planting a seed. Planting a seed is giving our children the skills. And even though they will be resistant, either because you're catching them at a bad time, like they're in emotion mind, they're very upset. If you say, hey, do you want to try your breathing technique? Do you want to try, counting to 10 or counting backwards? They may in the moment try it, but oftentimes they will resist it, get a little angrier in the moment. So our timing is very important when we're giving kids skills, but knowing that we need to repeat ourselves, parents, I really want to remind parents and manage the expectation that when your baby was an infant, they didn't get the word dog the first time you said it. It takes about 1,000 times of hearing the word dog before they actually understand and make that connection between the dog that's in front of them and the word. So we want to adjust our expectation that when we're teaching our children these skills, they're going to need repetition and they're going to need time to learn these skills. I do have that incredible moment where my daughter was 22 years old. She was in Thailand and she called me and said, Mom, you've got to tell the parents you work with and you've got to tell the kids that these skills really work. Because it takes time to germinate those seeds.
It does. It does. And I love that comparison to how long it takes for children to develop skills and language just to develop when they're young. And we expect that. We don't think, they should be walking tomorrow just because I'm walking in front of them or I'm talking about walking. Of course, I'm being silly, but it takes the pressure off, doesn't it? Because, of course, it is extremely painful as a parent of an anxious child. It is extraordinarily painful. And there's a saying that we're only as happy as our least happy child. It really does affect us. Of course it does. It's meant to, because we're meant to be moved to help them. But what might feel like helping in the short term can often exacerbate the problem, can't it?
Yes, and you gave that example for yourself when you said you went to your mother for reassurance. Well, your mother would most likely, like many well-intentioned parents, reassure their child that it's okay, and they give the child the reassurance. And as you said, that's an avoidance strategy, an avoidance of sitting with the discomfort. And so that is often a way that we also see anxiety presented is the child and the adult are both trying to avoid this uncomfortable feeling because it is really tough. There's another metaphor that I use that you might enjoy, which is children with anxiety are like puppies with big paws. And they need time, just as puppies need time to grow into their paws, children need time to grow into that anxiety. Because as I said earlier, it's a biological, we're hardwired to have anxiety. And even a child who has those intense emotions and very, intense anxiety that they feel, so it's more problematic than a child who has less anxiety. Even for those children, they are going to grow into that anxiety. And our desire to fix them is strong. It's an urge that we all have. And oftentimes, unintentionally, we end up shaming our children because children feel like having anxiety is bad and they don't want to have it either. So we really want to focus on helping children accept the discomfort, accept who they are, because they're going to be adults with anxiety. And that's okay.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
That's exactly right. And my psychologist used to, and listeners to the podcast will have heard me say this before, but my psychotherapist used to say, it's only anxiety. And I just wanted to give him a good old across the face, like obviously I'm not a violent person, but I just felt like, oh my gosh, like this thing is ruining my life. At the time when I was deep in just coming out of depression, actually, and learning about my anxiety, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'd postponed my wedding. We'd cancelled the church. We cancelled the reception. I couldn't work. I was like, it's only anxiety? I don't understand why you're saying that. I do now. I do now because it's not to be dismissive.
Right.
And it's not to be dismissive. It's just, hey, this is a thing. It's anxiety. We understand it. We know what we can do. You'll learn to live with it. And you've got to get the skills to do that. You spoke about skills before for parents. Can you share a couple with us here?
Of course. So I am intensively trained with DBT, and I love that you had on, just recently you had on Professor James Mazza, who just developed the DBT program for children in schools. Fabulous stuff that we will be teaching children in schools. Oh, look at that. You've got your own copy of the book. It's fabulous.
Yes.
It's fabulous. Yes. I tell my teenagers who have a little resistance to doing my teen DBT groups, they're like, oh, why do I have to do this? I said, because you're ahead of your time. You watch and see. You're going to be the one who your children are going to go to school, and they're going to get it when they're in school, because we're trying to really give children these emotional skills. And the idea is that we want to give both parents and children the same skills so that it becomes a common language. So in our family, we talk about emotion mind, wise mind, reasonable mind. Before I even knew about DBT, there was a book I had read called Raising a Son. And he talked about emotional zone and thinking zone. So my daughter was 3 years old when I was using that language with her. And people say, what age can you start using these skills? No age is too soon. You can use these skills. You can model these skills. Modeling these skills are really important. So if I'm upset, instead of trying to calm my child down, I might start with myself. And oftentimes I did say that to my daughter because I'm a highly emotional and sensitive person as well. So as I was raising my 3 children, as we all know, it is not an easy job. And so I would get frustrated. I can get easily upset. And so I would work on modeling the skills of taking a breath, stepping away. There's a great skill called the stop skill. And the stop skill says stop, which is the S. It's an acronym. T, take a step back. Observe what is happening. That's an incredibly powerful skill in and of itself. And then P, proceed mindfully. With children, I didn't call it the stop skill. I used to call it freeze because they know freeze tag and all of that. And
Yes.
I would, as I had my children's group, I'd play a game and I'd say, freeze. Tell me one thing you notice. Now, we don't have to wait till our children are anxious to teach them this skill. As a matter of fact, don't wait until they're in a moment of anxiety. Play these games with them. Teach these skills to them when they're not upset. So you might say, freeze or stop. Tell me what you observe. Take a moment. Tell me one thing you observe. And everyone in the room can do that. You can do it in the middle of dinner. You can do it in the middle of preparing dinner and say, hey, let's do freeze, observe, and now let's decide how we're going to proceed mindfully. So people begin to notice they're observing their inner world, their urges, their feelings, their thoughts. I might model to my child, wow, I noticed I just had a thought that I wonder if dinner's going to be a little well done. Something like that, so that they begin to see that there are thoughts that we observe, there are urges. I just observed that I had an urge to yell to come to dinner or something like that. So I
Yes.
really enjoy teaching the mindfulness skills of observing. So we might just be driving along and practice, say what you see. Say what you see, say what you feel, say what you think, what you're thinking, and just observing all the universe that's within ourselves and the universe around us so that we start to practice, because that's where the change comes. Mindfully observing what's going on gives us the ability, the next step, to change it if we want to. Does that make
That's
sense?
exactly right. Oh, absolutely. And I can hear your ACT training coming through in that as well, with
Yes.
the idea about observation. And it is because it's hot emotion when we're,
Yes.
in the midst of it, when our kids are in the midst of it. And so, like you say, practicing these outside of that when everything's calm. And it's practice. It's like any skill. You would never go to the NBA just by once learning how to dribble
Exactly.
and do a layup. I mean, it takes so much time. And I love that Dale called you and said, tell everybody it clicks, it clicks, it clicks, it does. That makes perfect sense. But when we're distressed, when our kids are distressed, we just want things to change in the moment.
We do. Sometimes I do use a skill in the moment, although, as I said, there are two things that I do when a child is very upset in the moment. Try and get their attention. So I had fun. I'm visiting my grandchildren right now, and I don't remember what was happening, but my granddaughter was very upset, and she is 5 years old. So she was upset, and I just turned to her and I said, "Hey, Emma, have I ever shared with you, smell the flower and blow out the candle?" And it sounded strange enough that she stopped what she was doing and she listened. And I just took that deep breath. I held my finger up like it's a flower, and I took a deep breath in. And then I moved my finger away from my mouth and I blew out the candle really slowly. That's the child's version of paced breathing, right? We breathe in and we exhale twice as long. So she looked at me as if I was strange, and that's perfect because I grabbed her attention. I don't mind being the strange mom or grandmother. And then she listened, she heard it, and she went back to her maybe having, being upset. But the idea is that I know she heard it. I know it went in. And so parents want children to practice it right in the moment. I was like, nope, she got that. That was, that's the basket. That's 2 points right there. So that was one thing. And the other thing is the value of validation when someone's very upset, because that's super, super important to help de-escalate sometimes in the moment, the conflict, the emotion, the intensity.
Validation and empathy doesn't come naturally to everyone. It's not the default response. We have we laugh here at home because my gorgeous husband, Peter, we've been together since we were 19. We've been together 30 years, which means I'm 49. I'm okay with that. I think growing older is such a gift. And we joke because validation and empathy is not his default response when something is happening. And it's mine. I've trained myself to do that. But every now and again, I will instinctively go to fix it mode. And so I think we need to be forgiving of ourselves, forgiving of the people around us, and help our partners to learn what we need when we're upset, but also as parents to really remind ourselves and practice validating and empathizing with our children. Can you share a couple of scripts, just a couple of brief scripts that parents could practice saying when they notice that their child is distressed, whether it's anxiety or something else?
So one of the ones that parents often try to do and get confused by it is they will, I can see that you're angry. And I've seen a lot of children go, "Of course I'm angry," and they get very angry and that escalates. Validation is in the eye of the beholder. That's the first rule of thumb. So if you say something and the person increases their intensity, you're not validating. For some reason in that moment, that didn't feel validating to the person, and it probably felt even invalidating. They don't want to be reminded that they're angry. They, whatever. So sometimes I tell parents there are definitely different ways of validating. Sometimes doing less. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen. That's validation. When your child comes home and they want to, "Oh my God, this happened. And you're like, "Well, do you want to go in and talk to your friend? Do you want to tell them this? Should we call the teacher?" And we get into fix-it mode. That's talking too much, and children love to be heard. So we want to remember that just being heard is an incredibly validating response when children are talking. Listen. Do you, okay. Wow. Ugh, that's terrible. Be real, but you don't have to think that you have to be brilliant and say anything, because being brilliant is keeping your mouth quiet sometimes. All right. And I'm a talker. So this is, I say what I also need to hear, right? My adult children are still teaching me to say less and I love it. That's one very important, powerful way of validating is listen and acknowledge what the person's saying. The second way is parroting back what you heard. And so when your child says, "My friend didn't let me play at recess," you just parrot back what you heard. It sounds like your friend didn't let you play at recess. I said the exact same words as the child. It's okay to be a parrot and repeat back what you heard. It's very validating. And you will see the person go at what the response, if you hit the nail on the head, you'll see the response because they'll say, "Yeah, can you believe that? They didn't let me play. Nobody let me play." And they further explain. So when we get to some validation, it may be more of that. Another one that my daughter, I actually give credit to my daughter Dale because I couldn't figure out how to get through to her. And I couldn't figure out how to connect to her. I couldn't figure out how to validate her. And one day, out of the blue, because I had tried everything else in my toolbox, I said to her, Dale, you must have a very good reason for hitting your brother. That's a paradoxical statement.
Wow.
And when I said that, the tears and the softness and her, I can't tell you, it was a response I'd never gotten from her because remember, she was my oppositional child. So whenever I tried to work with her and help her stop hitting her brother or whatever, I got more reactivity. I got more opposition. But this time, when I said, you must have a very good reason for hitting your brother, she cried, she got very soft, she curled up and she said, yes, because he teases me and I don't know what else to do. And I went, okay.
What a turning point.
What a turning point. It was one of those moments where I was wow, that is brilliant. And so I offer that line to parents, to your spouse, to your child, to your friend. You must have a very good reason. It's just being the curious alien, and it's not condoning any behavior. I didn't say, yeah, go ahead and hit your brother as much as you want. Now that I understand it, go at it. No, that's not the approach. It's not condoning behavior, which some parents might think it is when you validate. People mistake that validation is condoning or you like something. I am acknowledging. It's simply an acknowledgement that she felt teased and that was the best she could do in the moment. So that's a little line that I use. You must have a very good reason for. And that's a level of validation, which is we're trying to understand the other person's perspective for their behavior, for the anxiety, for whatever else is going on.
Yes.
So those would be three that I would highlight: the listening more, the parroting back or mirroring or reflecting back, whatever you want to call it. And then the third one is this understanding. And I get to it by using that paradoxical statement. You must have a very good reason for slamming the door, hitting your brother, refusing to go to school.
Yes, it is. It opens the door for them to drop the defenses.
Yes.
And open up. And
exactly.
That is incredibly powerful. And it's such a learning curve, isn't it, for us as parents? We need to be light on our feet, don't we? And flexible and learn about what our different children need and just reinforcing we don't always get it right. We don't. I mean, the other day, one of our kids hopped in the car after school and shared something with me that felt really unjust. And my instinct was, I want to say something about that. You know, I want to call that. That was what in my head. Thankfully, I didn't voice it, but that was where I went because Mama Bear wanted to, make things right. But even though I had those thoughts, I observed that was my initial response. I didn't open my mouth and say that. And I listened and validated, but also said later, what do you want to do about it? And the answer was nothing. And I think that is a really important thing for us as parents. We don't have to solve all their problems. And I know that that's a really huge part of what we're talking about here today, that life is difficult. Life throws curveballs. We get rough seas and calm waters and all the metaphors. If we don't let them experience it and support them to experience challenge, like you said at the beginning, when they're young, how are they going to cope? How are they going to manage in healthy ways when they're out in the big wide world and experiencing the ups and downs, the increased challenge of then having to live and manage their finances and relationships, intense relationships with intimate partners and all of that. Oh, my gosh. So I love that we're talking today really about really setting these kids up for success. And I know that you spoke about DBT before, and some of our listeners will have listened to that DBT episode with Jim Mazza, but some won't have. So I wonder if you could briefly just dialectical behaviour therapy is what DBT stands for. Talk about wise mind, emotional mind and reasonable mind and another distress tolerance skill. We've talked about paced breathing. And yeah, if you could just give listeners just a little bit more insight into this therapeutic approach, because it's just so good.
It is. Okay, I get just as excited as you do. So the 3 states of mind that you mentioned are emotion mind, wise mind, and reasonable mind. But one way that we want to understand it is that in DBT, the word dialectic teaches us that there can be 2 opposing thoughts, feelings, or perspectives that can coexist at the same time. And I think that's a really, really important concept. And when I'm teaching children, often people with anxiety have a lot of black and white dichotomous thinking. They think of things as right and wrong or good and bad. And in dialectic behavior therapy, we're really trying to teach them that there can be 2 opposing ideas and thoughts and feelings that can exist, and there's truth in all perspectives. So when one of the dialectics, one of these opposites is our emotion mind and our reasonable mind. In our emotion mind, we feel our emotions. They're often hot, illogical, disorganized. They make us feel sometimes out of control, right? That's the far end of emotion mind, thinking of this as a continuum. On the other end of the spectrum is our reasonable mind, the cool, calm, and collected part of ourselves that can make a decision because it's a fact. It's based on the facts, the sequential kind of thinking. And so we have these 2 parts of our brain, and they are different parts of our brain. Our emotion mind is in the back of our head, and the prefrontal cortex is our reasonable mind. And our wise mind is the overlap of using both of those states of mind. And we would like to use our wise mind to be more effective in our life and get the life we want to live. So Marshall Linehan, who developed dialectic behavior therapy, has a beautiful line, is building a life worth living. And it's our wise mind. It's knowing how to bring together our emotional self and our logic mind and bring those parts together so that our wise mind is wise and uses both of those. We need them both. And so we want to be effective in our lives. And we don't say, wow, what you're doing is good or bad. Is it working for you? Another line that I use all the time is try to say, is that working? And not in a dismissive kind of way, as you said, but genuinely, is that working for your long-term goals? So we want to get to know and recognize when we are in logic mind, when we are in emotion mind, and then how to use both for our wise mind. And those are making decisions. For example, if I'm on my way to doing this recording, I went out shopping for a little bit and I was at the farm stand, and then I wanted to go get eggs, and then I wanted to go, and I wanted to do all these things. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. So my emotion mind was so excited about being at a farm stand and wanting to go shopping for eggs and everything fresh. And I was just so excited about it that my emotion mind was getting carried away and didn't care about the timing and didn't care that I was had to get someplace on time. And my logic mind sort of showed up and said, it's 3:00 or whatever time it was. It's 3:00. It's time to go in order to set up and get ready and not be rushed. So my wise mind brought on my logic mind online so it could say, wait a minute, do you have enough time to keep shopping? And that was just a small example that happened this afternoon where you can use your wise mind to help you make decisions.
And it's a very easy diagram to draw. It's 2 overlapping circles and you just fill in the blanks. Wise mind's in the middle, emotions in one circle, and reasonable's in the other. And so it's something that we can start to use that language with our children too, can't we?
We can use that language. We can model it. Oh, I had that moment when my daughter was maybe 5 years old, and I taught her that language, and she turned it back on me appropriately and said, Mom, you're an emotion mind. And the first time it happens to you, I'm telling your listeners that the first time it happens to you, you're not going to like it. But it's okay because we want to be able to recognize that in ourselves. She was right. I was an emotion mind. And so it's great. It's a common language for everyone. Another part of dialectics, which I think is very important, is this your version and my version. So one of the things that you were talking about spouses, my husband with my daughter used to get into who's got the last word kind of battle. They used to, and he didn't get, you know what? I'm not going to play that game with her. And if she wanted to have her version, I'd say, okay, great. That's your version. That's not my version. And it allows us to get away from the right and wrong of parents trying to prove their child, no, it's not true, that this didn't happen or whatever. I just go, sure, that's your version, not my version. That's okay. You get to have your version. And I love it. It takes away the need to get to that who's right and who's wrong point of view and have that last word. So I suggest trying that as well. It's a really nice way to acknowledge and validate both I have a point of view and my child has a point of view.
And it maintains that connection, doesn't it? Because
Yes.
that parent-child relationship, no matter what age they're at, and you've got beautiful relationships with your grown-up kids
Yes.
and obviously now their kids. Our relationship with our children is so important. And so the strategies that you're sharing around your version, my version, two things can be true at the same time. This idea that we can listen and validate.
Mhm.
Each of these ideas, when put into practice, not only helps with anxiety, not only supports them to learn to manage and cope and get them through difficult moments, but it strengthens that connection between us, doesn't it? They trust us more. We as adults, we're not going to go to the person that tells us, I told you so,
Mhm.
that doesn't want to listen, that wants to tell you all of the reasons that what you're talking about is relevant to them. We don't go to those people. And so why would our kids come to us if we don't learn to listen and to really respond in ways that are helpful?
Mhm. Yes, and that connection is, I speak of that so much on my podcast because you are absolutely right. We need an insurance plan to help our children get out in the world. And the connection is the foundation so that when they feel seen, heard, and understood, that's what's so important. And when a child has anxiety, people don't get it. And they don't get it. So if as parents, we can help you understand your child's anxiety and we can notice it and we can name it with a non-judgmental approach, then our child feels like we understand them. And that is parenting gold. That
It is.
is so important for a parent to be able to observe and name. I call it notice it and name it. What you see so that we don't have to fix it, but we do want to make that connection because I used to get, even though Dale and I had a lot of conflict together, I got these beautiful Mother's Day cards and all this time saying, you get me. And it's
Oh.
because I could name it in her. I could see it in her. I said, that's your anxiety. I didn't fix her anxiety. I accepted her anxiety. I said, you are sensitive. This is who you are. You're not too sensitive. You're not too anything. You are exactly who you are. And you get to be an expert on yourself. And she still lives with her anxiety, but she truly understands it. And the connection, as you spoke about, I'm so glad you brought that up because that is truly the foundation. And my definition of the connection is being seen and heard for who you are.
That's a really beautiful place to finish. As much as I've got so much more I'd love to talk with you about, but I would dearly love to talk with you on the podcast again if you're willing.
Yes, I love talking
brilliant.
with you. Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
brilliant. Oh, thank you, Leslie. And particularly you sharing your family examples. I love that you've shown that vulnerability and that openness and honesty and authenticity because for any of us listening to you, the examples that you're sharing are so relatable. And for parents, you may not have come across it yet, some of the scenarios, but inevitably they all come across our path at some time or another, don't they? And whether or not anxiety is an ongoing issue or whether or not it's something that comes and goes as it does for many at the normal end of the spectrum, what you've shared today is absolute parenting gold. And I'm very grateful. And I know listeners will be really keen to learn more about you and connect with you and your podcast. So where can they find you?
Oh, thank you so much.
Other than at your daughter's house in,
Yes.
in the United States. Other than that, online.
Right. Online. You can find more information about me and my podcast and signed up for my newsletter at ismychildamonster.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at Leslie Cohen-Rubury. That's Rubury. And I do have a Facebook group, so just search Is My Child a Monster Parenting Community. My last and final ask would be go to subscribe wherever you get a podcast to Is My Child a Monster. It's a new parenting podcast, and we are so excited I'm so excited to be out there sharing this information. As you are, I've loved listening to your podcast and that we are sharing and getting more resources out to families, caregivers, and making it more accessible. That's my mission, and I know that's yours, and I share that with you. So I really do appreciate the work we're doing in terms of making it more accessible.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. And thank you for starting your podcast. It's a big deal to start a podcast. There's a lot of time and effort and thought and investment financially that goes into running a podcast. And we do it because we care deeply about making a difference. And I'm just so excited that you've launched Is My Child a Monster, because that's a question lots of parents will ask themselves. And it's frightening. It's frightening. And you take the fear out of it. You're very special, and I'm very, very grateful for your time. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Jodi. It's been lovely talking to you, and I'd love to talk with you any other time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. I just loved talking with Leslie and really be keen to hear what you took from this episode. I know there's so much, but any particular strategies, ideas, or insights that you are going to start with? Choose one thing and start somewhere so that you can start to make change. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll be back with you again next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.